Hi there, gaming buddies. I am making a review of The Savage World of Solomon Kane from Pinnacle Entertainment. Quite a big book, as you can see. I like big books, and I cannot lie. There is a price tag of $50 in the back. I got this for €50 some time ago, several years now. Uh, it's one of the prettiest and well-made gaming books I've ever seen. The back cover here is stitched very well, so you won't be losing any pages unless you really handle this book very roughly. Pages are glossy and in full color. Um, I'll show you if I can find a decent picture of some of the artwork here. You can see the level of artwork in the book. It's very gothic feel, but yeah. And the text is very easy to read. The font size is not too small, and since the text is separated clearly in these columns, it's very easy to keep track of where you're reading. So, what is it? Like it says here on the cover, it's based on the works of Robert E. Howard, the same guy who wrote Conan the Barbarian. He also wrote another character called Solomon Kane, who was a Puritan, which back in these days was pretty much like almost like a curse word or a slight against someone to be a Puritan. But yeah, this was someone who was thrust into the role of a hero somewhat reluctantly, but he had the right stuff, the moral fiber to do the things that no one else could or was willing to do, to smite evil and protect the innocent. And that he did. And this game centers around the time when Kane is an old man and the next generation of heroes is starting to follow in his footsteps. Um, the time frame is set in the Age of Discovery in the 16th and early 17th century. And at its core, this is a pulp fantasy game. The world has some added parts that were written by Howard, like Atlantis could probably be found in here, all sorts of ruined cities and mysterious places where danger lurks. Um, the world has far more evil and corrupt people in it, uh, or at least their evil and corruption is even more extreme than it was back in those days. But this can be played either as very grim and gritty tale like the novels and the books, or a light-hearted swashbuckling adventure. It fits both because this game, like it says in the title, it's the Savage World of Solomon Kane. That's because this game employs the Savage World's rule set, which is very well equipped to handle swashbuckling action. Um, Now, unlike a lot of other games that are based on the Savage World rule set, you don't need to buy any additional books to play this game. This includes uh, all of the core rules that you will ever need to play. All you need is a dice set from D4 to D20 and everything in between, and a deck of cards for tracking initiative and other things. Um, yeah, the book is just shy of 350 pages and includes a quite enjoyable plot point style campaign called The Path of Kane, where the player characters are able to uh, follow in the footsteps of Kane in certain iconic locations from the books. But this campaign also includes some of those places that are completely new, or were not written up by Howard himself. So uh, yeah, these can be used separately, like pick and choose what you like, or just follow very closely to the original story if you like that sort of thing. Um, but it has some nice world description, not a lot, but it's meant to cover all the corners of the earth, so it's not made for historical nitpicking. They don't worry about getting all the facts right, but there is enough there so that you can sink your teeth into it and really live in those times through your character. Um, and it can take the characters anywhere from the old world, being Europe, to the dark continent of Africa, to the New World in America, and even the Orient in Cathay. So it's very packed, let's just say. And overall, I would say that this book is pretty a solid package. It has everything you'll really ever need. But for those of you who want a little bit more information, I'm going to talk about the system itself and the way, for example, combat and character creation works. So let's start with oh, by the way, I'm going to show you another nice, very iconic picture of Kane himself and a very large ape. And there's the table of contents, by the way. A lot of stuff. There is a good index in the back as well, so you won't have any problems finding things, and all the necessary tables for quick reference are copied in the back of the book. So if you need some help with the rules on the fly, you can just flip to the back of the book. But yeah, let's talk about the character creation, because that's an important thing. What can I play? That's what people usually want out of a review. So there are no classes really in this. You can pick a certain character idea, like being a bandit, an escaped slave, a naval officer, a noble, a shaman. Yes, there is a magic system in here, but I'll get to that later. Aside from that general idea, you just pick up what attributes you have, you buy them up, and skills as well. Skill list is very typical, nothing extraordinary there, but both of these things are well, the way Savage World handles it is that you start from a D4, the lowest form of dice, and then you buy up, improve that die type. So it goes from D6, D8, D10, D12, and that's where it tops off at D12. So, for example, a person with a vigor of D4 is not especially hardy and can be poisoned easily, can't take much physical damage and so on. But someone with a D10, for example, is considerably tougher to take down. There are also some derived statistics here, like charisma and toughness and parry, pace, which is your movement speed. But yeah, you start from D4 and get better. Skills work the same way. You start with a D4 -2 for untrained skills and go from there. A nice thing about this system is that this Savage Worlds has a concept called the wild cards. Wildcards are all of the player characters, all of the important NPCs, and all of the important monsters or creatures. These creatures, all of them, get to roll an additional die. This is a wild die, an additional d6. Every time they make some kind of test, they roll their skill or attribute or whatever die and the wild die. And they take the better of the two. So usually you're rolling against a target number of 4, so a wild card always has a bit of an easier time of pulling off those routine tasks, even in combat, let's say. And another nice thing is that the dice can explode. So if you roll the highest number on your die, you get to roll it again and add that result to the original. And if you roll the highest number again, you get to roll again until you end up with, well, you could very easily take out the big bad evil guy in a single shot if you get lucky enough. But that's just the way it goes. That's the swashbuckling fantasy feel I was talking about. But yeah, character creation also has hindrances and edges. So these are pretty much like in World of Darkness, merits and flaws. Some examples of hindrances are like bad eyesight, big mouth, which can get you into trouble. You could be ugly. You could be a pacifist. You could be in debt, for example. But yeah, most of them are pretty what you would expect. Couple in here and in another Savage World game, Deadlands, which I won't be reviewing anytime soon, but a couple of these hindrances are a bit iffy because they don't really act as a hindrance to the character, but rather to the people they are in company with. You know, big one would be greedy. I'll read it out loud so you'll get what I'm going after here. Your miserly hero measures his worth in coin. If this is a minor hindrance, he argues bitterly over any loot acquired during play, and if it's a major hindrance, the character fights over anything he considers unfair and may even kill for his so-called fair share. So you can see where that could be a huge problem. But if everyone at the table understands this beforehand and sort of plays with it the way it's supposed to be, I think played is sort of not to take it too far. Yeah, it can work, but I'm a bit wary of those types of hindrances that don't really that are a hindrance to the entire group and not just one character. But yeah, then we have the edges, and these are, some of them are just, you might be lucky, a fast healer. You might have some combat edges which give you bonuses in the way you fight. Giant killer finds weak points in massive creatures, for example, and so on. These are very cool. Some of them have requirements that you have some edge already, or certain skills, or certain attributes, or a certain level of experience. But yeah, they are very very nifty. There are also some weird edges here, which you might have a dangerous sense, for example, which is very useful. The gear chapter here is pretty solid. Stuff from back in the day includes some miscellaneous goods and some exotic weapons in case you really do travel around the globe. And yeah, the system also uses bennies. Now these are like game currency that the game master can use, or rather give to the players to use to get rerolls or avoid damage, for example. The game master also receives some bennies at the beginning of the session, so yeah, they can use them for their villains during the course of the game, which is very nice. However, unlike most other Savage World games, here in Solomon Kane, the bennies have an additional benefit. Whenever you use a benny, you roll a d6. And if that d6 comes up a 5 or a 6, the character that used it goes into a righteous rage, like the titular hero of Solomon Kane. Gripped with an overwhelming rage, holy conviction, or pure red-blooded fury. The exact rationale is up to you. Pretty much you get an extra d6 to add to your trait and damage rolls, which is huge. So, yeah, they just go wild and start hacking apart their opponents. Which, again, another nifty thing that separates the wild cards from the normal people, or what are called extras. What else? Oh, yes. There are no hit points in this game. Instead, they use a wound-based system. And damage has to overcome your toughness score first, which makes you shaken, and if after that your toughness is beaten again, then you take a wound. Extras, so normal NPCs and normal monsters, can only take one wound. But a wild card can take 3, even more if they have certain edges. And this means that a single player character can just wade through a sea of mooks and grunts in a very cinematic fashion, taking them down one by one in a single hit most often. And this is very cool. Again, fits the feel of the game, and if you've read Howard's stories, it's very fitting indeed. Then there is a chapter on shamanism and sorcery, the 2 types of magic. They are pretty standard fare, except that unlike in a lot of other Savage World games, there are no blast or bolt spells, so no magic missiles, for example. These are more like ritual and self-affecting things, like well, you could create a barrier of sorts, an immobile wall, to protect you or entrap an opponent, deflect incoming attacks, burrow underground, turn invisible. Pretty cool stuff. And here they don't use PowerPoints or anything like that. It's just a casting roll. And if you fail, there is some sort of backlash, which is nice because I do appreciate a system of magic where there is a harmful result for failure, so that it's not just taken lightly. After magic, there's a word on the art of storytelling, and even a I'm going to see if I can how well I can show you this. There's a map of the world of Solomon Kane. Not very, what I would say, heavy on the details, but it's enough to get you an idea of what the world was like back then, how it was viewed, where the Ottoman Empire is, and so on. That's in here. Yeah, but there's some advice here on for new game masters and even some old ones on how to create worlds and, or rather, adventures and events for the world of Solomon Kane. How different types of villains work and so on. Then there's a chapter on the world itself, the Age of Discovery, what it involves, how to handle things like slavery and sexism, which can be a problem because, let's face it, it was prevalent back then. better now, but still, you know. Uh, on from there, we go on to the first world description chapter of the Path of Kane. So they start with the old world in Europe and talk about the way things were back then. They mention some people and events of note here, which is nice, so that these are things that you can tie the player character's actions into, like the Livonian War and the 80 Years' War, the Gunpowder Plot, which is familiar, I think, to everyone. Um, but yeah, then there's a section on Africa, very well written again, full of cool little adventures, which are very uh, not too complex. But I kind of like that because this is not supposed to be overly complex anyway. It's supposed to be pulp fantasy, so that these stories and adventures fit that bill, right? So the game ends, or rather, the book ends with the horrid beasts of Solomon Kane, where you get to make your own creatures, and they give you some examples as well in the bestiary here. Natural creatures, of course, like hippos and hunting dogs. Some hazards as well, like what might happen in an earthquake. And then there are the unnatural ones, of course, the arcana, the demonic steed, and so on. Um, there are also people described here. So if you're going up against a human opponent, what a citizen will be like, statistics here. And as you can see here, I'm just going to show you this here. Savage Worlds statistics are not very long. You know, it's not a complex game in that sense, that um, easy to pick up, so you won't have to learn any really complex mechanics with this game. But still, a solid product, I would say, and good for any group and game master who wants something a bit different from their fantasy. Maybe a break from the sword and sorcery in a uh, completely fantastical world. Here we have a premise that it's the real world of the 16th century, but slightly different, slightly more fantastic, weird, dangerous, bizarre. And yeah, I think very good book. Definitely will look very pretty on your coffee table or shelf. Uh, but yeah, and very good value for your money, because, like I said, you don't need to buy more than a deck of cards and a set of dice to play this, because this has all the rules you will need. So that's it for this review, and if this interests you, or if you have any other questions on things that I might have missed, please let me know in the comments below, or in just a private message or email. I'll get back to you and let you know more. And that's it for this review. Have a very nice day.